Well, hello good people. As promised, I'm pressing on with the Ford engine this week. Regular viewers know I head out to work for a couple of weeks at a time and then spend the rest of my life hiding in a shed or flying the Aronca. I've got a neighbour who always says he knows when I'm back by the noise I make. So just for him, at 9:15 yesterday, that was Monday morning, I got the disc cutter out and chopped the front off the Ford sump. Of course, I did it outside to let the noise dissipate better. I don't want to damage my ears. That's the front of the dipper pan you can see there. It protrudes by about 1/8 of an inch or so. I'm just going to bend it up out of the way so it's completely clear of the new front of the sump. Obviously I want it to catch the oil from the main bearing here, but it will do as long as it's about in line with the back of the timing gear teeth. I don't think much oil is going to be missed, and of course what it does miss will go down into the sump proper and back to the oil pump. The original Pietenpol plans have a piece welded on here. The sump was sort of replaced with a welded patch, and then the top cover mimicked the original cast iron cover, which was really heavy and was just cut out of 20 gauge steel. The seal was a flinger ring which was actually soldered to the crankshaft here. They must have sort of sweated and tinned the crankshaft and then soldered a ring on, and then there's a grease cup off of a Model T Ford on the back. I'm not going to worry about the flinger ring and the Model T Ford grease cup. One, because I don't have a Model T Ford grease cup, and I'm sure Bernard would have used a lip seal if he had one at the time. It's an easier way of doing it. I'll set it in an aluminium housing. The other thing I'm going to do is make the cover in one piece. The sump is remarkably thick. I should think that's probably 14 gauge. I put a micrometer on it earlier, and it's somewhere about 80 thou thick. So I guess it was pressed out of 14 gauge. It's quite a piece of work. A few Napoleonic types, that's about 2mm. I think I can braze to it all right without buckling the sump, and I could actually bolt a keeper across the top, which I think is probably a good idea. But if I were to braze a triangle in there on the outside and then cut from some 1/4 inch a plate that goes in here and actually braze it inside, so I'll V the plate, bevel the plate, because I don't want it coming out anymore. I could then drill and tap the plate to take 1/4 UNF bolts and stick the whole cover on as one piece. I've had a bit of a mess around. Here we are. That's drawing around the original one. I can mount the lip seal here in its aluminium housing, so the cover will sort of come down, along and up and bolt on. Of course, the other thing Bernard didn't have was Tiger Seal, so I can stick all this on with Tiger Seal and it should never leak. There shouldn't be that much oil running down the front joint because most of it is going to be flung off into the dipper pan anyway. Obviously there's going to be a little bit comes off the timing gears, but the oil level itself is going to be well below the level of the joint here. So I can't imagine it really wants to leak. It can if it wants. I don't care. I dug out this length of 2 inch wide by 1/4 inch thick steel strip. I've cut some pieces from it to go in the front of the sump here. So that will go across the bottom there. And then these two bits, these are two shorter bits, up each side, all shaped and then brazed in here and round. Unfortunately, my acetylene bottle, which has been unenthusiastic for a while, is now empty. The price of bottled gas these days, one sort of has to run bottles till they're empty. So I'm going to have to get some more before I can braze that up and stick it in. The steel strip's also useful for making the keeper. I'm going to bolt the keeper across from the forward sump bolt there to this one here as well. So when I braze it up, the whole thing doesn't pull inwards, because I'm a bit worried if I don't put a keeper on there, this is going to tend to pull inwards as the braze contracts. Not as bad as well, but it will contract a bit. And then the sump won't fit properly back on the block. So I'll cut the keeper out of that strip as well. However, I can go ahead and make the cover plate anyway, because that needs cutting out and drilling and all the rest of it. And it also needs a bit of a modification. The fibre timing gear sits just inside the case. If I put a ruler across there, there's, well, it's a gnat's crotchet. It's about, I don't know, 10 thou or something. It's a very close fit, but it is inside and it's not touching the ruler at all. However, this gear on the crankshaft protrudes ever so slightly, a bit like Freddie Mercury's teeth. So what I ideally need to do is press my steel cover so this part comes out ever so slightly, or slightly protrudes by maybe 1/4 of an inch. There's another good reason for doing that as well. This is the pulley that runs on here, and it has this cutaway for the key to sit there, which obviously is basically the drive key. Bernie Pietenpol modified these pulleys. I don't quite know how, but I believe he cut them off here because they were all set back in a little bit for the water pump drive. So having cut them off, I reckon he stuck them in a lathe, cleaned them up, and then made a steel spider and brazed the lot together, which is what I'm going to do in the future. I'm not going to worry about the water pump as part of this conversion. We'll cover that in a future episode, but it's not needed right now. And I am going to cut this pulley off, and then I'm going to turn that down so it's nice and round, so in the future I can modify the pulley as I think Bernard Pietenpol did it. But the other reason for moving that seal forward slightly, so putting a bit of an offset or a joggle in the cover, is that there's a lovely shiny bit on the seal there, a bit like a bald man's head, where the old felt ran for ages. And obviously I want to run the lip seal on that same part. So if I sort of push that back like so, I reckon I need about 1/4 of an inch of a joggle on the cover itself. And then obviously with my aluminium housing that takes this lip seal, that will move everything forward enough so the lip seal is running on nice shiny bald man's head metal. I've marked out a cover plate, so I'm just going to make some rudimentary tooling and try and press the joggle into it. Before I turn this piece of aluminium into the holder for the lip seal, I'm going to turn it down to about a 3-inch diameter on the outside and use it to press a bit of a joggle into that front cover plate. I'm going to hold the aluminium disc on this piece of studding, but I just had a bit of a brainwave. I decided I don't really want to hold the studding direct into the chuck. It might mark, I hope not, because it is best quality Chinese, it might mark the jaws. But it might not grip that well as well, because obviously there's not that much contact area. So I've got a piece of scrap water pipe there I've just cut off. I'm hoping that will go in and then crush up and grip the studding nicely. Let's see. Go around all three. There's a nut on the back of the studding as well, so when I tighten the disc up, it can't pull forward out of the jaws. I lock the back gear in place, I can wind this up. There we go. But it's 3 thou over. That'll do. In fact, before I take it out of the chuck, I'm just going to deburr it mechanically. Another neighbour, one who doesn't complain about noise, gave me a massive sheet of MDF. It was a board against the side of a bath. It's really solid stuff. In fact, I'm not so sure it's not made of depleted uranium or something. Anyway, the idea is I'm going to press the cover upwards through a couple of sheets of this. So I've drilled it already and cut a hole out with my jigsaw. I've never done this before. I've seen it in comics and various other things, so it's all a bit of a first go for me. I'm just putting bolts through the corners I drilled earlier to sort of locate the front and the back. So when I put the press tool in, it will be straight for both. Marvellous. Now the idea is I'm going to put the press tool in, basically this disc behind, and push upwards. If I do that, I'm going to put some G-clamps on it, so it's all held down very tight. The idea is to pull this up through there to a certain depth. Now, this is actually 3/4 of an inch or thereabouts. So I've cut a disc at 3/8 of an inch. I'm going to drop in there, and I'm going to put a piece across the top, a wooden piece. So we just draw this disc up through, and then it stops. I had a bit of trouble pushing this through, so I've made a washer out of that 2-inch wide, 1/4 inch thick plate. I'm going to wind this up again now, with everything held in the vise. See if it doesn't work a bit better. Spanner should be nicely locked on the other side. Well, quite a heave-ho to get that pressed out. You can see on the back very defined where the aluminium spacer was pushed in, but it's offset by about 3/16 of an inch. It's more than enough by the time I screw the ring onto the outside. I'm not going to cut it out or drill any holes yet until the sump is done, so I guess that's really the next job. I have got some more gas, so just to mess around, I cut a couple of V's out of the dipper pan here and here, bent this forward so it's sort of upright, welded the V's up, and I've now bent this over again a little bit. I can bend it a little bit more once the sump is modified, but I think that's about right. It's going to catch everything it needs, and it's going to have a decent depth of oil in it. I've cleaned the faces of the sump and cleaned round here, all with a wire wheel in the drilling machine, just so it's nice and clean to braze to. I ought to make a cardboard template for here, so add a piece of cardboard. It can now become go forward. With that, I can lay out these pieces of metal and cut them to the right size before I weld them together. It's a lot better than trying to hold them up to the end of the sump and work out what needs to go where. Be a little more accurate. So I cut them and weld them. Then there'll be the minimal amount of dressing before it's ready to braze into place. Arc welding complete. A little bit missing there, doesn't matter though. It's all welded both sides. And once I'd finished welding it and cooled it down, I took the whole lot outside with the angle grinder just to cheer my neighbour up again. After a lot of filing and hacksawing, we now have this broad U-shaped piece which sits in here quite nicely. What I'm going to do is put a piece across here, just a piece of metal, and then a couple of G-clamps holding it forward. I was going to bolt a keeper across here, but I don't think it's necessary because, of course, this in place, etc., will actually stop everything from shrinking in. And this sump is so thick, I don't think by brazing around the back here, because I'm going to braze in there, I can't see that it's going to pull in at all. So I'm going to take a chance on that. The very worst, if it pulls in a little bit, I could just elongate these holes, but I've got a funny feeling that it'll just stay where it is. This is so strong because it's such thick metal. I don't think it's going to go anywhere at all. That's the piece held in place. It's quite a good fit all around here now. I did take it out and give this bit a little percussive persuasion, which has worked well. So I'm going to stand the whole job up on a piece of Mr. Brunel's broad gauge track on the back there. And the idea is to braze in here. Now you'll have to forgive me. I'm not going to put the camera on. I'm just going to get on and braze. I'll show you the end result. This is now brazed mostly inside and out, all on the outside and down on the inside until about there on each side. It was a bit difficult doing the middle part, so I went across to the outside. I did quench the end because it helps get rid of the flux. I'll clean this up with the flat wheel a little bit and then we might as well try it on the engine. When I tried this on the cylinder block last night, it was very obvious as soon as I lowered the block down that the fibre timing gear was catching the corner here. So I've actually chamfered that away by about 3/16 of an inch. It was actually sloping upwards ever so slightly. It's now down at quite an angle, so that's clear of the gear. I matched that side only for prettiness. The last outstanding job on the sump, apart from drilling the holes, which I won't do until the front cover's made, is to fit this. This is the oil feed. If you remember, I made this new cover for the valve chest, sort of to Berners' plans from thin steel. And that there is the overflow, which regulates the level of oil in the valve chest. And that runs down to this fitting here and feeds the dipper pan. So I'll get that brazed in and then we can put the dipper pan in and have a look at it in all its glory. I apologise for only showing you half the brazing. I got to the point where I needed to be around here and realised that the camera was in the way. And rather than turn the torch off and mess around and all the rest of it, I merely picked the camera up and put it somewhere else and carried on brazing round. So it's brazed and quenched, again, just to help the flux depart this earth. And it all looks pretty good. It's a pretty solid fitting. So let's try the dipper pan in there. That's it, that's the pan in place. So when the oil starts returning, it will come into the front of the pan here. And obviously I'm keeping the migration because this engine is going eventually in my cycle car, I believe. I'm keeping the migration front to rear. Bernard made his rear to front. I've covered that previously, just pointing it out for anyone who is still interested. That's the catch pan for the apron. When I first tried it, the rear web of the crankshaft just caught, so that has been bashed with a hammer lots of times. I will obviously double check that it's still clear. The front has fitted well too. This is bent forward so it touches the new piece of the sump, and so that'll catch all the oil off the timing gears into the dipper pan before it goes down into the sump as well. It fits a lot better second time round. Nice clearance here now, generally looks a lot better. You might recall I mentioned filling this area in. Well, I've come up with a very elegant solution, otherwise known as a bodge, which I'll show you when I make the front cover. I'm going to rough this out now, outside. It's nice and sunny. I tried to do it with tin snips, it's a waste of time. Obviously I'll trim it with tin snips, but the wonderful and very quiet disc cutter is the answer. So I think I'll just do that. Obviously I'll put a hole saw through there, and then I can turn that piece of aluminium that I used to press the dimple, that will become the holder for the seal. Sadly, I have to stop there as it's time to head to work again. But progress has been a bit slow, I know. There have been all manner of other things going on. The Vauxhall's been in daily use through the summer. I sorted out someone else's Jap engine as well, which was quite a long job. I didn't film it because I'm going to do my own Jap engine soon, and we're going to have a real deep dive over probably a dozen episodes or so. Real cure for insomnia. And someone has lent me a 1937 wing. It's an Aronca 100 wing. It does have a destiny. It's going on an Aronca 100 eventually, but I've borrowed it to use as a sort of three-dimensional blueprint, if you like, whilst I make my wings. It is a little different, but we'll have a walk through that wing, maybe next month once I'm home. As always, thank you for watching.